Chapter 22. Remembering is just an invention of the mind. Spring has sprung, Freak says, and so are we. This is the day school gets out, and we've been taking the long way home. By now I've been carrying him around on my shoulders for almost a year. We call it walking high, and even if we haven't been going on any dangerous quests lately, so the fair Gwen won't have to throw a fit, Freak hasn't exactly given up on slaying dragons. The world is really and truly green all over, he says. Do you remember what it used to be like back in the Ice Age, when the glaciers covered the earth and the saber-toothed tiger roamed the frozen night? No, I say. How could I remember that? I wasn't even born. Don't be a pinhead, he says. Remembering is just an invention of the mind. I go, what's that supposed to mean? It means that if you want to, you can remember anything, whether it happened or not. Like I can remember what it was like in the Ice Age. I kept trying to invent stuff, the wheel, central heating, indoor plumbing, but the Neanderthals were happy with just a campfire and a fur coat. If you guess that Freak has been reading the book about the Ice Age, you're right. He's been seeing a saber-toothed tiger behind every bush, except that so far, all of them have turned out to be stray cats. Or once it was the skunk, and it's a good thing I can run fast or we'd have to soak in tomato juice, which is the only way to get rid of the stink. Inventing electricity would be tough, he says, without copper wire and magnets, but I could handle inventing a compass. All you have to do is rub the needle. That way everybody could head south and get away from the glaciers. First you need to invent a time machine, I say. So you can go back there and give all the cavemen a hard time about indoor plumbing. Freak goes, you don't need a time machine if you know how to remember. Which is something I'll always remember, him saying that and me trying to figure it out. Freak's birthday is a couple of days after school gets out, and the fair Gwen has already made it clear he's not getting to ride on the space shuttle. 13 is supposed to be extra special, he says. The least you could do is get my name on the list. Or how about a linear accelerator? Just a small one so I can split a few atoms. The fair Gwen goes, I suppose this means you're going to be an obnoxious teenager. The deal is, this is really 2 birthdays for the price of 1, because Freak the Mighty is almost a year old. Talk about a prodigy, Freak says. 1 year old and already he's on his way to 9th grade. The fair Gwen just rolls her eyes when we talk like that. Freak says we can't expect her to understand, because you can't really get what it means to be Freak the Mighty unless you are Freak the Mighty. Anyhow, the party is just a family affair because Freak isn't supposed to get overexcited, which is like saying the moon isn't supposed to go around the earth. Last year I got the ornithopter, he says. This year, why not a helicopter? A real one, though. You can't expect a teenager to play with toys. Why not a jet plane, the fair Gwen says. Cool, Freak says, a Learjet. What he's really getting, and I've been sworn to secrecy, is this new computer, the one he's been drooling over in the computer magazines. It comes with a modem, which means if he has to stay home for some reason, he can go to school over the telephone. The idea is I'd be there in the classroom with a matching computer. The only problem, I don't know squid about computers. You'll learn, the fair Gwen says. Kevin will teach you. But why would he have to stay home? I ask her. We're out in the kitchen and she and Grandma are frosting the cakes and Freak is hanging out in the living room, acting like he intends to have a party every day for the rest of his life. Maybe he won't have to stay home, the fair Gwen says, and she and Graham kind of lock eyeballs for a second. That secret code that mothers have. This is just in case, Max. I think maybe he already guessed about the computer, I say. That's why he's jerking your chain about the space shuttle ride in the Learjets. I'm not surprised, the fair Gwen says. You can't keep anything from Kevin. Freak hardly touches his supper. He says he's saving his appetite for the cake. And finally we're all done eating except for Grim, who keeps rubbing his belly and rolling his eyes and telling the fair Gwen what a genius she is with fresh peas and new potatoes and salmon, and he'll just have a smidgen more. Thanks, until finally Grim clears her throat and smiles, and Grim has to apologize for being such a pig. The funny thing is, when at last they do bring out the cake, Freak asks me to flame out the candles while he makes the wish, and then he doesn't even touch his piece. He just sort of pushes it around the plate. I figure he's so excited about getting the new computer, he's lost his appetite. Not that he's letting on that he doesn't feel good. He's acting just as wise and smart-mouthed as ever. "I should have asked for earplugs," he says when we're done singing Happy Birthday. "You better check the glassware for cracks." "Hush up," the fair Gwen says, "or we'll give you another chorus." When she brings out the computer, he acts so surprised and happy. Maybe he really is surprised. Right away, he wants to turn it on and show off what a brain he is. And because it's his birthday, we all have to sit there and admire him and go, "Amazing," and "Fantastic," and "Kevin, how did you know that?" and so on. He's showing Grim how to play 3D chess, and just watching that makes me dizzy. So after a while, I go out to the kitchen and help clean up, which is something I'm good at. "Maxwell never breaks a dish," Graham is saying. "He's very sure-handed for someone so large." We're almost done putting stuff away and wiping the counter when Grim shouts from the other room. All he says is, "Kevin!" But we can tell right away that something is wrong. We run in and Freak is leaning back in his chair, making this wheezing sound, panting real fast, and his eyelids are flickering. "He's having a seizure," Grim says. "Call an ambulance!" The fair Gwen is already on the phone. I run out in the street and start waving my arms and jumping up and down so they'll know where to stop. And I keep running back in the house to check on things, but the fair Gwen says there's nothing we can do except wait. Chapter 23, The Empty Book. They won't let me visit him the first day, and Graham says I'll just have to be patient and let the doctors do their business. But I can't stand just sitting around, so I decide to walk over to the hospital, which Grim says is miles and miles, but suit myself. I know how to get there because Freak and I went yonder that way once so he could show me the medical research building. It's not the same, though, without Freak along to turn the houses into castles and the swimming pools into moats. All I keep thinking is, what a jip it is to have to go into the hospital on your birthday. Finally, I get there and I see the fair Gwen's car in the visitor parking lot, but Grim says I should leave her alone and let her tend to her son. So what I do is I go around back to the medical research building and find this stupid little tree I can sit under. I have that old ornithopter bird with me, and I'm winding it up and flying it around. Figuring maybe Freak will get a chance to look out the window and see it flittering by. That's my plan. And I'm under that puny little tree messing with the bird until this guy mowing the lawn makes me move. So I wander around to the front of the hospital, and that's where the fair Gwen finds me. "Maxwell," she says, and she gives me this great big hug. A wet hug, because she's been crying. "Max, we've been looking all over for you. Kevin wants to see you. He's making quite a fuss about it, and Dr. Spivak says it's okay, but just for a few minutes." So the fair Gwen takes me inside, and I figure we're heading for the medical research building, but instead we go into the regular hospital. "He's in the ICU," she says. "So they're taking really good care of him?" "They're doing their best, Max," she says. The intensive care unit is the place where there are so many nurses, you can't hardly turn around without bumping into one, which I do as soon as we get there. Every patient gets a room alone, and there's all this electronic gear the fair Gwen says is called telemetry, which means when Freak sneezes, the nurses know about it before he can wipe his nose. I'm not scared at all until I actually go into his room and see how small he looks on the bed. They've got him sitting up with all these tubes going into his arms and up his nose, and Dr. Spivak is guarding him. She won't let me come too close. "I thought no visitors was the best policy for now," Dr. Spivak says, "but what Kevin wants, Kevin gets." Dr. Spivak is this small woman with short red hair and a real stern face, and it's like she's mad because Freak wants to see me or because I'll break some of her precious equipment. "That will be all," Freak says to her. "You are dismissed." The thing is, his voice sounds funny. Not just faint and weak, but kind of whistly. Only when I get closer do I see that he's got this weird little plastic button stuck in his neck. "It's called a tracheotomy," he says, holding his finger against the button, which stops the whistling noise. "Standard procedure to facilitate breathing." "Does it hurt?" "No way," he says. "I think it's cool. Listen to this." Then he plays with his finger against the button, making his throat whistle a tune, which he says is the theme from Star Trek, although you can hardly recognize it. So when do you come home? I ask. Free can't move much the way they've got him set up in the bed, so he sort of shakes his eyes instead of his head. I'm not coming home, he says. Not in my present manifestation. I go, what? The bionic unit is on red alert, he says. Tonight they'll take me down there for my special operation. The next time you see me, I'll be new and improved. I'm scared, I say. Don't be a moron, he says. You're not the one having surgery. I still wish they wouldn't. Don't argue with me, he says. I have to lean close to hear him because his voice is so small and whispery. He goes, if you argue with me, I'll get upset and they can tell on the telemetry. Then you'll get in trouble. So I just stand there like a lump and don't say anything for a while. I put the ornithopter on the foot of the bed, but I don't think he notices. See that book on the table? He asks. He can't point, but I see the book on the table. Open it, he says. The book reminds me of the dictionary he gave me for Christmas, except when I open it, all the pages are blank. That's for you, he says. I want you to fill it up with our adventures. Huh? Write it down, dummy. I was going to do it, but now it looks like I'll be busy getting used to my new bionic body. It'll probably take me weeks just learning how to walk with long legs. I put the book down. You're the one with the brain, I say. I'm the long legs. Don't get me upset, he warns. I won't have the time, so you'll have to do it. Just write it all down like you're talking. Put in all the fun we had, the cool things we did, our adventures. But you know I can't write, Kevin. It's all in your head, Max. Everything you can remember. Just tell the story of Freak the Mighty. No big deal. I pick the book back up, but I don't say anything more about how hopeless it is, me trying to write stuff down, because I don't want to set off the telemetry. He does that himself about a minute later when he starts to cough, and before I can say anything, the room is swarming with nurses, and Dr. Spivak is telling me I have to leave. Out this second, young man, and let us do our jobs. They let me wait outside the ICU with the fair Gwen, who is just standing there at the window, wringing her hands and not saying anything. And then finally they come out and say he's okay. It was just a bad spell. They have him stabilized. A while later, Graham comes into the hospital and she drives me home. Nobody talks much at supper that night, except when Grim opens his big mouth and says, Poor Gwen looks like she's in terrible pain. I go, Poor Gwen? She's not the one having the special operation. Grim and Graham just look at each other like they can't believe I'm so dumb. And finally Graham says, Maxwell, dear, make an effort to eat your vegetables. That night I put the empty book in the pyramid box for safekeeping and for good luck.